standing at that neighborhood barbecue with a plate of corn-based charcoal. I saw the brunette across the patio while the smoke was still rising from my mess. With the same horrified expression, she stared at her own blackened disaster while her hair caught the late afternoon sun. She muttered, "Well, damn," as she jabbed a fork into her burnt corn. "It appears that we're both excellent cooks," I exclaimed, holding up my own plate of mistakes. The laughter was contagious. "My name is Valerie, and it seems that I will not be allowed to attend any more barbecues. Jessica and I believe we could be identical when it comes to culinary mishaps." With mischievous sparkles in her blue eyes, she approached. "I am an urbanite, organizer. Although I am capable of redesigning entire neighborhoods, corn seems to be my worst enemy. This is the hat designer. I am able to form, felt like art, but I'm totally defeated by vegetables." As we stood there, two working women bonded over burned food, and I had a feeling I hadn't had in months, but not just attraction. Oh no, if she wasn't lovely in that carefree manner that caused my heart to race. It was a bond. "In fact," Valerie stated, pointing to the tiny park that is visible through the fence, "I'm redesigning that area. Green community. I specialize in certain areas. I adore that park. When I need inspiration, I visit that place for my designs." Her expression brightened. "Really? What sort of hats do you produce?" "Personalized. Mostly pieces. Although millinery is a dying craft, there's a certain allure to making something that frames a person's face, altering their perception of themselves, such as how effective urban design can alter how people perceive their community." Long after the barbecue had officially ended, we continued to chat for another hour. I discovered that I was studying As she spoke, she made hand gestures, enthusiastic about community development and green spaces. She inquired, genuine interest in the artistry of hat making, asking insightful questions about my work. "I should probably get going," she said at last, but neither of us made any movement. "Here," I said, taking out my business card, "if you ever wish to talk about adding artistic elements to your park design," she said, passing hers to me. "That would be nice. And perhaps next, it's time for us to completely avoid the corn." Her business card felt cozy in my pocket. As I made my way home that night, urban planner Valerie Moore, I believe this because of the way she had truly looked at me. Only the start. 3 days later, I was holding a portfolio outside Valerie's downtown office, like some anxious schoolgirl. One of my hat designs, the afternoon sun was reflected by the glass building, creating, "Everything appears to be promising and golden." "Jessica," Valerie's voice echoed. The lobby, with her hair pulled back to accentuate the crisp line of her professional outfit. She looked stunning. Her office was just what I had anticipated. City maps and clean lines, covering one wall, and her desk was covered in architectural models. However, the passion was what drew my attention. As she laid out the blueprints on the conference table, in her voice, "Look at this space over here." She indicated a section of the layout of the park. "I see a place where nature and art coexist. Sculptures or installations that shift in accordance with the seasons." I caught a whiff of her perfume as I leaned in closer. "People, what about works of functional art? Able to communicate with, that's right. Do you understand?" As we both reached for something, our hands touched. The identical pencil. It was a quick touch, but I could feel it all over. "Want to see where the magic happens?" I asked. I was taken aback by the invitation and asked. Valerie was running in my millinery studio 2 hours later. I finished a wide-brimmed creation that morning, and she ran her fingers along its rim. The light streaming in the afternoon, saw the blue in her eyes through my windows. "Jessica, this is amazing. The attention to detail and the way you've molded the crown. It all comes down to comprehending structure, which is probably similar to urban planning." She grabbed a second hat. "I delicately beaded. Smaller piece? Could I?" Naturally. Observing her try on I wasn't prepared for creations to feel so personal. Every hat changed her, highlighted various facets of her attractiveness. She looked elegant and enigmatic when she wore the wide-brimmed piece. The smaller hat made her seem softer and more personable. She noticed my reflection in the mirror and said, "You're staring." Mirror, with heat rising up my neck. I lied and said, "Professional assessment." "Is that, what are we calling it?" The question hung between us, full of potential. I said, "Coffee." Because I needed to decompress before I made a snap decision. Over the next 2 weeks, our coffee dates became a regular occurrence. We would get together at the little cafe on Mission Street every Tuesday and Thursday, supposedly to talk about the park project. However, more often than not, our discussions veered into private territory. "Describe your worst design for me." One Thursday, Valerie stirred her latte and said, "Disaster. Last year, I created a hat for a wedding in society. Worked on it for 3 weeks. Imported silk and elaborate beadwork. On the wedding day, it served as a chew toy for the bride's dog." Valerie almost choked on her coffee. "No, the bride was crying. In 4 hours, I had to make a replacement out of whatever materials I could find." "Did you succeed?" It seldom, but she was gorgeous, and that was what counted. Valerie's expression became contemplative. I adore what you do because of that. You give others confidence and a sense of beauty. My communities are shaped by work, but how people view themselves is shaped by yours. People are also shaped by cities. The areas where we inhabit have an impact on our interactions, emotions, and overall quality of life. Leaning forward, she, just a little, that's right. This park project is very important to me because of this. It's not only about greenery, it's about establishing a space where community is formed and people can interact. Naturally, I found myself observing how her lips curled as she spoke, and how her eyes brightened when she talked about labor. A week later, Valerie called to share the news of her presentation to the city council. Damn, I was in trouble. It is tomorrow morning, she said, her voice tense with anxiety. The one who has the power to make or ruin the park project. You'll be outstanding, I told her. However, a concept was already taking shape. In fact, could I make something for? I worked until 3. So trust me when I say that you should wear a hat to a city council meeting, creating an elegant item in the morning that would go well with her business attire without overpowering it. Understated elegance that would be respectful and emphasize her inherent beauty. I was unable to control myself when she showed up at my studio the following morning for the fitting. Steady, adjusting the angle while standing behind her and rubbing my fingers against her as she looked in the mirror, temple as I carefully placed the piece. It's perfect, she muttered. Our gazes locking in the mirror, was inches away when she turned around, close enough to see the tiny freckle next to her ear and smell her shampoo. Jessica, she began, but her words were lost. I leaned in, and she gave me a gentle, inquisitive kiss before her hands found my waist, drawing me in, and then all that was left was the sensation of her mouth against mine. We were breathless as we parted ways with her, who tasted like possibility and morning coffee. I managed your presentation, she whispered to him. The presentation, but she took a step back anyhow. You're right, rain check. She texted me that night, received approval, and celebrated with dinner, similar to her office. Her apartment was simple but somehow cozier, with exposed brick walls, plants all over, and so you can actually cook, I said, observing her movements as I smelled something delicious coming from the kitchen. The barbecue was an exception, he said with assurance around the kitchen. I swear, she had prepared pasta with homemade sauce and wine, which likely cost more than I typically spent on groceries in a week. Although the tension simmered, we discussed everything over dinner, with the exception of what had occurred that morning between us. She cleared our plates and said, the hat was perfect today. I felt the idea was to make her feel powerful while wearing it. She was closer when she sat down again. This time, our knees touched. Do you make people feel like their best selves? Only. Special clients. Am I special? I kissed her again instead of responding. As we made our way to her bedroom, her hands got tangled in my hair, and there was no hesitation or reservation this time. Our route was marked by discarded clothing, and as we explored each, the city lights came through her bedroom windows, other with cautious urgency. Her skin felt smooth under my fingers, receptive to each touch. When she muttered my name, we moved slowly at first, then more passionately, and it sounded like a prayer against my ear. Her touch rekindled something inside of me that I had suppressed for too long, and months of tension finally found release. I realized there was no turning back when we eventually passed out together, exhausted and content. Later, lying tangled, she traced patterns on my shoulder in her sheets, saying softly, "This complicates things. The project, everything. I've never mixed business, so I'm not sure if it has to," but I turned to face her. With pleasure like this. I haven't either. She was silent for a while. Stay, tonight. I gave her a forehead kiss and said, I thought you'd never ask. I became aware that I had gotten deeper than I had ever intended when I watched her make coffee in the morning while wearing an oversized shirt. The following 3 weeks were a minefield of cautious professionalism. Whenever we got together at the community center to talk about a project, I became extremely conscious of every word and gesture. And when Valerie's hand touched mine while grabbing blueprints, I had to fight the impulse to hug her. The placements of the installations look good here, she said, indicating the Southern Park design. She spoke steadily, but I noticed a faint flush on her face when our shoulders touched. I tried to concentrate on the work at hand, but the morning light should have hit them just right. Rather than recalling her appearance in that baggy shirt a few days prior, Mrs. Patterson from the community board cleared her throat. The artistic elements truly complement each other, and you two make a great team. The useful layout, if only she understood how well we worked together. But upholding this polished appearance was wearing on me. During client fittings, I would catch myself daydreaming while my hands worked on the hat automatically. Modifications as my thoughts drifted to Valerie's apartment. Her laugh, and the way she called my name in the shadows. At the monthly mixer hosted by the city planning department, everything changed. I had gone to support Valerie while sporting one of my more. I saw her among the conservative pieces attempting to blend in with the throng of urban developers and architects. Rodriguez was tall, self-assured, and exuded a sleek sophistication that betrayed his expensive education and political connections. As they conversed by the bar, she leaned close to Valerie, placing her hand on her arm. "Val, you look wonderful tonight," Emma said, her voice barely audible to me from the other side of the room. "Val, since when did—" I watched as Emma's fingers moved over Valerie's sleeve, asking if anyone called her Val. Valerie didn't back off, but the gesture was far too personal for casual coworkers. When Valerie eventually approached me, she explained that Emma had just returned from the Seattle project. Before she transferred, "We worked together for 3 years. She seems familiar with you," I said, hating how petty I sounded. "Indeed, we have a professional history together." But the way Emma had gazed at her, the possessiveness, the way, when speaking with Valerie, her smile had changed, suggesting something less than professional, cooperation. Suddenly feeling uncomfortable, I said, "I should probably go." "Jessica, wait." Among all these city planning experts, but I was already on my way out the door. At home, I poured myself a large glass of wine, my chest tight with an unfamiliar jealousy that left me gasping for air, and attempted to work on Mrs. Chen's anniversary hat. But my hands were too trembling to handle the delicate beadwork. Valerie texted me on my phone, asking if we could talk. I looked at the message for 10 minutes before answering. "The project meeting is set for tomorrow." Valerie showed up at my studio rather than where we usually meet, and she appeared exhausted, as if she hadn't gotten much sleep either. "You don't owe me explanations," she began last night. Haven't established anything." "Oh no, Jessica, stop this." "Do what?" "Face reality. We share a bed. Emma and I have a past, but it's over and has been for 2 years. I'm supposed to assume that we're exclusive." Valerie moved closer. "Are you envious? She touched you, but you didn't look over. You have a meaningful career, connections, and a future in city planning. But I'm realistic, and we're from different worlds. You make art that makes people feel beautiful, and I make hats. Don't undervalue what you do, and you change communities. Regardless of what we have, it doesn't alter the reality that this is about more." Valerie reached for my hands, but I retreated. "Someone like Emma makes more sense for your life than Emma, isn't it?" she said softly, and I was unable to respond because she was correct. I had been trying to ignore how much I wanted Valerie and how afraid I was of her, but seeing Emma made me face those feelings, that desire. How sure I was that someone like me couldn't possibly be sufficient for someone like her. The quiet stretched between us until it seemed like my studio was too small to hold everything we were keeping quiet about. The first indication, a week later, when I woke up on my studio floor, encircled by hat boxes and I couldn't recall how I got there. My phone displayed 3 client missed calls, and based on them, I told myself it was stress, but timestamps showed that I had lost a whole day. I was sleeping poorly, eating very little, and working frantically as a result of Valerie's situation. However, my mind went blank when I attempted to recall the day. "Jessica, are you okay?" Valerie's voice seemed to arrive at our Tuesday meeting from a great distance. "You appear worn out." "I'm fine," I lied. I was busy with commissions, but I wasn't feeling well. As I stared at the park blueprints that appeared to swim before my eyes, time had become erratic and elastic. I would begin working on a hat in what seemed like the morning, only to discover that night had fallen and I had once more missed dinner. Occasionally, I would find myself standing in my kitchen, unable to recall how I had gotten there, with a coffee mug that had gone cold hours earlier. The panic attack began mildly. Anxiety flared up when I was sweating when I realized I had scheduled 2 fittings for the same time, and I was unable to recall the name of a client slot, but they swiftly intensified into full-fledged episodes where I would be out of breath. Certain that I was, Mrs. Chen called and said, "I'm dying or going crazy." One afternoon, my assistant Marcus said in a soft but she said you missed her appointment yesterday, which worried me. I checked my calendar, but the dates didn't make sense. "What day is it?" "Thursday." "Jess, I had a bad Wednesday. Lost the entire day as if it had never happened. Not just the parts that were forgotten. The worst part arrived. I knew it was important, and I had noted it on I had a calendar and set several alarms on my phone. But when I finally got there, confused and gasping, I discovered the meeting ended 2 hours ago," he said politely, leaving the meeting room empty save for a janitor tidying up. "Are you okay, miss?" In my well-chosen attire, I stood there holding the presentation materials that were meant to final approval for our park project, and I felt as though reality was slipping through my fingers like sand. My phone was buzzing with Valerie's increasingly desperate messages. Where are you? The council wants to know about the art installations. Answer me. Jessica. I was unable to explain why I had been sitting in my car outside the building. Appeared to have been hours, but felt like minutes. I was unable to inform her that I had observed the sun's passage across the sky without realizing that time was running out. I ended up in Golden Gate Park at 3 in the morning that evening, unable to recall how I got there. I couldn't recall driving, but I did have my car keys in my pocket. A jogger. With concern on her face, she paused to see how I was doing. Are you injured? Do you need assistance? I'm not sure what day it is, I muttered, and making the admission was like jumping off a precipice. The following, Marcus discovered me in my studio in the morning, still dressed from the previous day, with half-finished hats all around me that I was unable to recall beginning. This must end. Jessica, you're frightening. Me? I'm frightening myself, I said, my voice hardly audible. How recently did you consume? Eat instead of just coffee and worry. I made an effort to recall, but the days blended together like rain and watercolors. I'm not sure. Additionally, Valerie, have you discussed the situation with her? The idea of telling Valerie that I was breaking down, the thought that I might be going insane after ruining our project presentation caused my chest to tighten with new anxiety. I am unable to, I muttered. She'll believe I'm insane, or she'll assume you need assistance, which you do. However, even as Marcus talked, I sensed time passing once more, his words fading into far-off echoes. My heartbeat seemed to be pulsing through the studio walls, and I was unable to determine how many hours or minutes had gone by since he had begun speaking. I tried to find something by closing my eyes, solid to cling to, but I felt as though everything was melting away around me. The life I had established, the relationship with even my own identity, Valerie, it was all breaking up into pieces that I couldn't put back together. The altercation started on I assumed it was Wednesday morning, before I had even unlocked the door. Valerie showed up at my studio, front door. Her expression was a mix of concern and barely controlled annoyance. Jessica, 3 weeks. 3 weeks have passed since you skipped that council meeting. I've been phoning, texting, and representing you before the city planning committee. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so much that I was unable to insert them into the lock. I can clarify. Are you able to? Because it appears that you have left me and our project without even providing an explanation. I stumbled inside after finally opening the door. Valerie was right behind her. The studio didn't work out. There are half-finished hats all over the place. Torn from their pads are sketches. Mold is growing on coffee cups everywhere. Oh no, Jessica, what took place here? I wanted to fabricate a story about stress and deadlines. But looking, I was at my breaking point when I saw her worried expression. I muttered, I'm running out of time. Hours, days, sometimes I can no longer tell what is real. Her rage instantly turned to alarm. What do you mean? Wasting time. I wake up in places I don't recall visiting. I don't show up for appointments. I vowed to write it down. I was left memoryless in my car outside the grocery store last Tuesday at midnight. Of taking a car there. Valerie took a step forward and spoke softly. Now, how long has this been going on? Since the evening I witnessed you and Emma together. Ever since I became aware of how afraid I am of my feelings. For you. The honest and unvarnished admission hung between us. Valerie made contact, hesitantly putting a hand on my arm. Tell me everything. So I did. I informed her about the lost days, the panic attacks, and the way that reality seemed to elude me whenever I made an effort to cling to it too firmly. How my mind constantly came up with new ways to ruin any possibility of happiness as we grew closer. I've previously done this, I said, settling down on the stool next to my desk. Every time I see someone who truly cares about me, I look for ways to, before they can leave me first, destroy it. Who says I'm going? Valerie, look at me. Take a look at this location. I am unable to even look after myself, much less manage a relationship with someone as mature as you. She was silent for a while, long moment, observing my studio's chaos, the dark circles under my eyes, and how my hands shook when I attempted to retrieve a hat. At last, she said, you need help, expert assistance. I know, and I'll assist you in obtaining it. I began to object, but she persisted. Her hand, the park project can wait. Marcus has been taking care of your client, consultations, and I've been informing the planning committee about your family emergency. You told falsehoods for me. I kept you safe. A distinction exists. She took me to see therapist Sarah Martinez that afternoon, who focused on anxiety disorders. It was a harsh first session, perched in that cozy office with its plush, lighting, and strategically positioned tissues. I had to publicly acknowledge how difficult things had been for me. Frequently, dissociative episodes happen when we are overcome by feelings that we are unable to comprehend. According to Dr. Martinez, your mind is attempting to shield you from emotions that appear too risky to fully experience. But why now? Why when things were finally going? Since doing the right thing feels riskier than doing the wrong thing. You can't be devastated by loss. During the following 2 weeks, as I went to twice-weekly therapy sessions, Valerie entered my life in ways that I'd never anticipated. She managed my studio, took client calls, and even completed a straightforward commission when I couldn't concentrate long enough to finish it on my own. One evening while she was cleaning up, I told her, "You don't have to do this." I had created yet another mess. I would like to, but Emma is in Seattle working on another project. She returned for a week, greeted former coworkers, and then departed. What you believed you saw. It was nostalgia, not romance. Between us, I observed her carefully and precisely folding fabric samples. Why? Since you weren't prepared to hear it, and I understood that this isn't really the case. Didn't you tell me that sooner? About Emma at all? She was correct. Although Emma had acted as a trigger, the true problem was my own fear of being vulnerable, of allowing someone important enough to cause me pain. I'm improving, I said softly. Dr. Martinez believes that as I learn to control the underlying anxiety, the dissociative episodes will lessen. Valerie, I know you are. You haven't lost time in 4 days. It was accurate. The therapy was helping, but more importantly, Valerie's constant presence taught me that not everyone vanished when things became challenging. 3 weeks later, I discovered it when I entered my studio, changed. I finished hats, arranged my workbenches, and sorted fabric samples by color and texture. Valerie stood in the middle of it all, a tiny smile teasing her lips, like pieces on display in a gallery. She said, "Welcome back," and I rubbed my fingers over the well-known tools that had been polished and put back in their appropriate locations. All of this wasn't necessary for you. When everything collapsed, I had to know what drove you. I was able to observe how your mind functions when your workspace is well organized. In disarray, she had done more than just plan. During my therapy sessions, I struggled with panic attacks and dissociative. Our park project had been sustained by Valerie's episodes. Updated presentation materials and city permits, processed, and construction schedules modified. She said, removing the updated design, the council approved the final design. Blueprints. The focal point of the installations will be your hat sculptures. I gazed at the plans with feelings that threatened to overwhelm me once more. All of this happened while I was collapsing. We're partners. Partners do that. The word, full of promise, hung between us, co-workers. But perhaps something extra. I apologize to you for vanishing, leaving you to manage everything by yourself. And being so, I almost destroyed it because I was afraid of what we had. She moved closer until I could smell her familiar scent. Although you owe me nothing, I'm here if you're ready to give it another go. Rather than responding with words, I gave her a kiss, not the frantic, terrified kisses of the past, but something more profound and deliberate. She answered right away, wrapping her arms around me and holding me in the peaceful haven of my renovated studio. She whispered against my lips, "I missed you, even though you were here. I promised not to run this time because I missed you." That night, we drove to my, rather than her apartment. I wanted to demonstrate to her that I could open my life and space to her without the barriers I had put in place. Cautiously around me, we moved slowly and purposefully together, charting each other's reactions as explorers asserting new lands. Her touch was patient and respectful, as though she realized that the most personal gift I could give was trust. Her whispering my name sounded like we completely lost ourselves in one another upon returning home, and our passion grew organically until the rest of the world faded away. And in the aftermath, we were both tangled together, breathing heavily and contentedly. Later, for the first time in months, I felt at ease as I lay in bed with Valerie's head resting on my shoulder. According to Dr. Martinez, I mutely stated that attachment anxiety was the cause of the episodes, and that whenever I approached someone I loved, my brain would essentially shut off to shield me from possible desertion. And now I'm discovering that it's worth the risk to be present, even when it's frightening. Emma faced an unexpected test the following morning. "Val, there you are." Rodriguez showed up at our coffee shop, slipping into the booth across from us as if she were a native. "I've been attempting to get in touch with you." I experienced the same constriction in my chest, the impulse to run away before I could see whatever assertion Emma was going to make. But instead I grabbed for Valerie's hand beneath the table. "Emma," Valerie said calmly, "I wasn't expecting to catch up with you before you returned to Seattle. The city offered me a job here on a permanent basis." Emma's eyes flitted to our joined hands, her face changing a little. Valerie said, "I'm in a relationship now. Jessica and I are obviously together." Emma's smile was courteous but Chili, the hat maker. How charming. Valerie got up suddenly before I could answer. Jessica has a client fitting this afternoon, so we should go. Valerie looked at me from outside the coffee shop. Are you okay? I inhaled deeply, using the technique Dr. Martinez had taught me to check in with myself. I'm okay, I said, with Valerie's hand in mine and my feet on the ground. Valerie's smile was radiant as she said, "She can't threaten what we have unless I let her." She was shocked to learn that it was true. Damn, right? She can't. She publicly claimed me by kissing me on the sidewalk, leaving no space for uncertainty. With her fingers entwined with mine as we made our way back to my studio, recognized that this was the appearance of recovery, not the lack of fear, but the existence of something courageous. 6 months later, I watched the sculptured hat catch the morning light as I stood in the finished park at dawn. Installations that we co-designed, 5 bronze pieces, each of which symbolizes a distinct facet of community connection, placed like sentinels of collective creativity throughout the green area. Valerie put her arms around me from behind and said, "Perfect. Better than the largest installation, a broad-brimmed shape that provided organic shade for the parents brought coffee to the children's play area while the kids played. And yesterday, teenagers had been using it as a makeshift study hall, and I remarked, 'Your urban planning genius made them work.' I just made pretty shapes," she said, leaning back against her warmth. "You created art that brings people together. That's magic." The grand opening of the park was planned for the following weekend, but we had asked for this quiet time before the festivities got out of control. We were going to share what we had created together, both personally and professionally, talking about bringing people together. I turned in Valerie's arms as she said, "I have something together," with a nervous excitement in her voice. "For you," she said, taking a tiny, wrapped package out of her jacket pocket, which contained a delicate, straightforward silver ring, gorgeous, with a small compass rose engraved on it. "It's not an engagement ring," she said hastily. "Not yet. Anyway, however, Dr. Martinez stated that grounding exercises benefit from physical reminders, something to touch when anxiety spikes to remind you that you're safe, loved, and present." I put it on my right hand. Its weight was unexpectedly reassuring, and the compass rose because I kissed her then. "And we'll navigate life together, no matter where it leads." She was grinning when we parted ways, tasting possibility and commitment slowly and deeply. "I have something for you, too," I said, pulling out that radiant smile I'd fallen for at the barbecue disaster 8 months prior. Her in the direction of the studio bag I had brought, which contained a hat I had been honing for weeks. It was structured just like her. The crown was shaped like a professional piece, but it was softer and had subtle details that would look great on her face, to allude to motion, development, transformation, and the sort of hat that would simultaneously give her a sense of strength and femininity. "Try it on, Jessica. It's beautiful." She placed it carefully, and instantly, the hat did more than simply sit on her head. It became a part of her, adding to her inherent confidence. I saw what I had hoped for, while incorporating a creative touch that reflected our partnership. "There's more," I said, reaching. The second item was a rolled blueprint tied with ribbon, which was placed back into the bag. I saw her eyes enlarge as she unfolded it. "These are our house plans. If you desire." I discovered a property in the Mission District that can accommodate a millinery, downstairs studio, and space for a home office where you could work on smaller tasks. She looked over the sketches I'd commissioned by a friend of the architect, in which she traced the movement of natural light from public to private areas, would navigate our possible life together. "You created this with both of our needs in mind." And I took a cue from the greatest urban planner in the city. "Are you asking me to move?" she asked, looking up from the blueprints with teary eyes. "In with you. I want to know if you want to create something lasting rather than merely weekend or work-related activities. Shared dreams, shared space, shared everything sleepovers, but a real life, rather than responding right away." She gave me another kiss, this time lasting until the sun had completely cleared. "Yes," she whispered against my lips as the sun rose over the surrounding park. That afternoon, Marcus said, to all of it, the house, the life, the everything, joined us at our favorite restaurant for a celebratory lunch. He had played a key role in maintaining my business. It felt like a gift to see him calm and proud while I was running during my worst anxiety attacks. "So, when do I get to attend this wedding as the best man?" "We haven't discussed marriage yet," he said, lifting his wine glass. But my hand instinctively reached for the compass ring. "Please, you two are already arranging to buy real estate together. Right now, marriage is just paperwork." Valerie chuckled. "He's not incorrect. When we're ready in the park, Marcus, I was thinking of something small and private, recommended under your artwork." The thought struck me with unexpected vigor. Marrying in the area we'd designed together, encircled by the neighborhood we'd worked in with our collaborative art as evidence of our commitments. "That's actually perfect," I replied. As nightfall drew near, we went back to spend a last private moment in the park before the construction workers arrive tomorrow to prepare for the opening. Festivities. Along the paths we had created, Valerie and I strolled hand in hand, previous benches arranged for best, gardens planted to bloom successively throughout the seasons, and people observing. I'm amazed that we actually did this, I remarked as I took a seat on the bench under our biggest hat sculpture. We are the best team, pressed up against my shoulder. We were both exhausted but incredibly content. I cherish you. Silently, she said, all of you, including the nervous, complex aspects of your humanity. I also adore you. I appreciate you, remaining when I was unable to remain in the moment for myself. Always, as the sun descended over our, after finishing the project and painting the sky in rose and amber hues, I experienced a level of calm I had never known. Feasible, not the lack of difficulties, but the existence of a worthy companion. After 8 months, I awoke to Valerie's humming in our kitchen, the scent of coffee wafting through the house we purchased together in the Mission District. My workspace took up the whole ground floor is now filled with natural light thanks to skylights that we installed especially for the detailed beads. She called, morning, beautiful. As I patted the floor and bared my feet, while still sporting the baggy shirt she'd discarded the previous evening, our lives had become accustomed to routines I never imagined possible. We had coffee in the morning, joint work sessions at the makeshift office, fashioned out of the kitchen table, evening strolls in the park where our Valerie handed me a steaming mug and said, Mrs. Patterson called. Hat sculptures had become landmarks in the neighborhood. More collaboration is needed if you're interested in helping the community. Board commissioned 2 additional installations for the extension project. Never. The ring on my finger had become instinctive, a reminder to take a deep breath, to remain in the moment during the sporadic spike in anxiety, to have faith that this joy would endure. Today was the first anniversary of the park's official opening, and we had organized a modest celebration, nothing grand, just Marcus and a few close friends getting together at dusk where, are you worried about tonight? Valerie inquired, accurately interpreting my face from sharing space and dreams. It's as nerve-wracking as the first night of an exhibition. She instantly recognized the tense energy of excitement instead of fear, of anticipation instead of panic. I completed a specials commission that afternoon, a delicate piece with elaborate beadwork that had taken me 3 months to finish. Someone asked for a wedding hat, something special that would be passed down through the family. Valerie called from upstairs as she changed into the dress we had chosen together, saying, almost ready. She showed up in my studio doorway 2 minutes ago last weekend. I almost dropped the hat I was holding. The deep blue fabric highlighted her eyes, and the simple lines highlighted her, the effortless grace and self-assured stance that had initially drew my eye at that disastrous barbecue. She smiled and said, you're staring again. Professional appreciation. Are we calling that it? We both laughed when we heard the reverberation of our first flirtation. Although a lot had changed since then, the fundamental chemistry remained, stayed, strengthened by closeness and confidence. Are you prepared to celebrate our anniversary? Marcus came early, set up a little picnic by our biggest installation. And as the sun sank, everything turned golden, similar to that first night when we were standing here deciding on our future together. A year after you two were formally the neighborhood's talk, Marcus said, lifting a glass of champagne to Valerie and Jessica, demonstrating that the collaboration produces the best art. I felt Valerie's hand slide into mine as our small group toasted, her thumb stroking over the ring of the compass that had served as my anchor. Speech time, Marcus declared theatrically. I began to object, but Valerie interrupted, her voice clear in the night air. 1 year prior, we opened this park with the idea that well-designed spaces unite communities. We found that the greatest partnerships change the people who form them just as much as the places they create. She looked up at me, her eyes gleaming in the warm light. I learned from Jessica that art is about connection rather than decoration. That beauty is useful. People are served by purpose. She also taught me that transformational love doesn't require perfection. As she went on, her throat constricted with emotion, there's more to tonight than just commemorating the anniversary of our park, about honoring the career and personal growth we achieved together. She fell to one knee, pulling a tiny velvet box from her, right there beneath the hat sculpture we created together as our first project. Pocket of the jacket. Will you wed me in the room we made together? Jessica Campbell, wearing a stunning piece that you created yourself, with the community we serve all around you. The ring was ideal, influenced by Art Deco, featuring a focal point that reflected light from the studio windows like the morning sun. Yes, I muttered, flanked by smaller gems set in a pattern that mirrored the compass rose on my grounding ring. And then louder. Yes, absolutely, yes, she said as she put the ring on my finger. Marcus was sobbing aloud, and even Mrs. Patterson had come from somewhere to join in the cheers of our friends. Observe the moment, I said, my voice trembling with anticipation. I have one more surprise. Nerves. Valerie waited patiently while I led her to the bench where we had spent so many planning sessions, suffered from panic episodes, where we had congratulated ourselves on each minor accomplishment in our personal and professional lives. Partnership. I opened the meticulously wrapped wedding hat commission I've been working on, which wasn't for a client. Box, displaying the delicate item I had created especially for this occasion. A design that combined components from each hat Valerie had ever liked in my studio, shaped to fit her face flawlessly, and embellished with beaded designs that conveyed the subtle symbols that only we would understand, that tell the story of our relationship. If you wear something I created, she lifted it with reverence and realized right away how many hours of love had gone into each detail. It's the most exquisite thing I've ever seen, with the sun setting behind us and our friends celebrating all around us. Valerie wearing, I understood that this was the conclusion I'd never dared to imagine, with her engagement hat and me wearing our future like a promise. Imagine, perfectly ours, but not flawless, Valerie said. Mrs. Campbell Moore, experimentally. That sounds good to me.